too late for Warren, or would it have made a difference at all? Neil?
It's an amazing thing to see sort out in the final minutes, hours here. Thank you, Kristen, very much. Well, as we've been indicating here, Joe Biden now heading to South Carolina tonight. Could that interrupt the vote he was planning on getting tonight? When a lot of people here, all right, he's bailing out on us. Should we bail out on him? Let's ask Inez Stepman with the Independent Women's Forum, Real Clear Politics, Tom Bevan, Democratic strategist, Robert Patillo. You know, Robert, I can remember, when Jimmy Carter conceded the election to Ronald Reagan, not everyone had voted, and there was that anger that was left over. Now, whether it would have made a difference in his case, obviously that was not the case, but a lot of races were maybe decided at the time on that. What do you make of the former vice president's move to leave New Hampshire in the middle of the voting?
Well, I think what Joe Biden is doing is making a decision for the Democratic Party that Democrats should have made decades ago, which is that Iowa and New Hampshire are no longer representative of the Democratic primary electorate. We're talking about two states which are don't hold the same values as the rest of the nation, which don't have the same electorate as the rest of the nation.
You know, let's face it, wouldn't he still be there? No, come on. He would still be there if it made a difference for him and it looked like it was going well for him, right?
I think what we have to understand is South Carolina is a far better representation of what America looks like today compared to New Hampshire. So the real person who needs to worry about New Hampshire right now is Elizabeth Warren, because if she cannot win a state in her own backyard, her viability going forward goes into question. Joe Biden has a very clear strategy. Win South Carolina, rack up on Super Tuesday, win the delegate count going into the convention. That's a clear strategy. Elizabeth Warren's strategy is a lot more murky than that. And
well,
after,
you might be right, but Tom Bevan, this sounds a lot like the Rudy Giuliani strategy of eschewing Iowa and, New Hampshire and placing all his eggs in the Florida basket. We know how that went. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, Biden clearly he's been lowering expectations and leaving town. I don't think is a good look. Everybody says South Carolina is his firewall, but I mean, just look at the struggle he's had in the last 8 days from his poor finish in Iowa to now. South Carolina is 18 days away, so his house is on fire, and by the time he gets to South Carolina, it may have burned down because the fire trucks won't be coming for another 18 days. It's going to be a long time if he has a really poor finish here. And again, Nevada's coming up next, and if he doesn't finish well there, I mean, it could be a real struggle for Joe Biden.
And as we were also getting anecdotal evidence that the former vice president's support among African Americans is slipping. We're not sure exactly where that support might be going, but he's in a world of hurt. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. This doesn't look good leaving New Hampshire. And I also agree that we wouldn't be having this discussion with regard to Biden specifically about which states are representative. If Biden was doing better in those states, he would be touting support in those states. It's not like he skipped those states the way that, say, Mike Bloomberg did entirely. He did campaign there and he lost. He lost badly. And more, he's not looking like Romney in 2012, the sort of elder statesman, the guy it's his turn and the party's going to settle on him, even if the base doesn't really like him. He's looking more like Jeb Bush in 2016, where there was a political class who thought he'd be a really, really good candidate, and then the base was absolutely gave an absolute veto to that. That's more what Joe Biden is looking like than Mitt Romney in 2012 today to me, and it's not good for him.
Do you see any chance, Robert, from this that there was an initial skepticism on the part of a lot of party regulars, for want of a better term, about the emergence of Bernie Sanders, and that they don't want to, nominate someone who they think would lose in a general election, so they've been kicking around changing the rules that the superdelegates can't vote on the first ballot, maybe allow them to vote on the first ballot. But that would invite holy hell, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you can change rules midstream. We saw already when the Democrats changed rules for debates to allow Mike Bloomberg to potentially qualify for a future debate, the firestorm that started. We have to have an above board process. We cannot have this decided in the back rooms and the cloakrooms. And look, I think allow Bernie Sanders to lay out his view and his vision for America, have him explain the same way that Elizabeth Warren had to explain how he's going to finance all of his agenda items, and let the American people make an informed decision. And I think that's why we're seeing a lack of importance in Iowa and New Hampshire, because the American people want to make their decisions with full information.
Tom, the role of Amy Klobuchar and her coming up the middle quietly, without much fuss, is getting a little bit more attention now. Where does she stand, do you think?
Well, by all indications, she is surging in the latest poll. She's in third place in our average and third place in a couple of the final polls in New Hampshire. The question is, where does she go from here? And ironically, with her moving up, it may actually strengthen Bernie, because now you've got another moderate If Buttigieg is in the 20s and finishes second, and if Biden stays in, which there's every indication that he's going to do, suddenly you've got three moderates, running in this race that have some strength. And if Elizabeth Warren doesn't finish well in New Hampshire, and it looks like she may not, that may also strengthen Bernie. So if Bernie comes away with a clear win, Amy Klobuchar's strength may actually benefit him in the end.
Inez, is this going to be a broker convention? I'm getting way, way, way ahead of myself. But what do you think?
I think if the Democratic establishment wasn't so reluctant to anoint Bernie Sanders, I think we would be talking less about a brokered convention. I do think that if he finishes strongly in New Hampshire, Iowa was sort of a mess, but he finished extremely strongly there. But I think we'd be talking about him as the presumptive nominee if the establishment wasn't so terrified to nominate an octogenarian communist. I think that we'd be talking about him differently. I don't see how you can deny the fact that Bernie Sanders is now the Democratic frontrunner and the presumptive nominee if he keeps going. Now, anything could happen. I'm not saying that the race is over by any stretch, but we're not talking about Bernie Sanders the same way we were talking about Joe Biden a month ago. And I think that's indicative of where the establishment is and where the media is.
By the way, he says socialists, not communists. But we'll see what happens. Oh, all right,
I disagree.
Guys, thank you very much. In the meantime, there's